A director known for his kinetic visual style and overtly masculine movies, Tony Scott put a new face on action movies beginning in the 1980s. He had a strong penchant for thrills, chases, and gunfights, elevating them into a distinct style that has become synonymous with his name. 10 years after his death, we remember Tony Scott. Tony Scott was born on June 21st, 1944, in the English coastal town of Tynemouth, 7 years after his brother Ridley. Cinema was in the Scott's blood, as his granduncle owned a popular movie theater chain. Scott initially desired to be a painter, attending the Royal College of Art and having previously achieved a fine arts degree from Sunderland Art School. Prior to that, Scott starred in older brother Ridley's 1962 black and white student short, Boy and Bicycle. He played the boy. In 1969, Tony Scott made his own short film, an adaptation of Ambrose Bierce's One of the Missing for €1,000, or around $1,500. Pressed by his brother, Tony Scott went to work on commercials for Ridley Scott Associates, founded by Ridley Scott. Scott leaned towards documentaries, but was lured there by money and the potential to own a Ferrari. Ridley was undoubtedly an early and consistent inspiration and role model. According to Scott, quote, "He is my best friend. It's been a brother-mentor relationship. But Rid and I are as tight as it can get. We are very tight and have had a brilliant relationship." He would also describe it as a, quote, "right arm, left arm relationship." In 1970, Scott directed the short film Loving Memory, which screened at the Cannes Film Festival. In 1975, he got experience with longer-form entertainment, directing an episode of the series Nouvelles de Henry James, adapting The Author of Beltraffio. But he was seeking his big-screen debut, also with an adaptation, setting his sights on Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. MGM hired him instead for another vampire picture, The Hunger, starring David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve. The atmospheric, stunningly photographed film premiered out of competition at the 1983 Cannes Film Festival. It was not a success with critics, but has since earned a rightful cult following and stands as one of the greatest vampire films ever. Interestingly, Tony Scott would later direct 2 episodes of the series The Hunger, a spin-off of sorts. Despite being a box office loss, The Hunger showed a distinct visual style from the new director. The Vroom Vroom Kaboom team of Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer were looking to add flair to their latest endeavor. Having seen The Hunger, along with a car commercial that showed a Saab racing a fighter jet, the car is driven by a man who looks remarkably like Tom Cruise, they hired Scott for Top Gun. Top Gun grossed over $350 million and landed at the top of 1986, expanded the map Tom Cruise was on, and upped the Navy's enrollment by a reported 500%. Scott even directed the music video for Danger Zone. With some of the coolest aerial sequences on film, Top Gun allowed Scott to tap into his love of adrenaline, as he was an avid climber, even scaling El Capitan multiple times. His passion for volleyball remains undocumented. Tony Scott became one of the most sought-after directors in Hollywood. His next, Beverly Hills Cop 2, would gross $153 million domestically, but wouldn't reach the reputation of the original. In 1990, he helmed the dull but stylish thriller Revenge, and had issues with the studio over editing, and reteamed with Cruise, Simpson, and Bruckheimer on Days of Thunder. Often criticized as Top Gun on a racetrack, it failed to capture the heat of Top Gun, but does have some impressive action sequences. Next came The Last Boy Scout. It was another troubled production that saw Scott clashing with producer Joel Silver and star Bruce Willis. But despite that, and that Shane Black's script changed quite a bit as production moved on, it's a bit of an underrated movie. Amid his post-Reservoir Dogs frenzy, Quentin Tarantino opted to bow out of directing his script for True Romance. Instead, it went to Scott. The dialogue and story are indisputably QTs, but the action staging, particularly during the climactic hotel shootout, is Tony Scott through and through. True Romance is undoubtedly one of Scott's best, perhaps his greatest. It, too, is a perfect harmonizing of screenwriter and director, even if QT didn't initially agree with Scott changing the ending to a happier one. Next came 1995's Crimson Tide, for which Scott recruited Tarantino to do an uncredited touch-up on the script. The tense submarine action thriller starring Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington shows a bit of restraint from Scott. Because the sets were limited, so too was Scott's ability to go crazy with a camera. It would be notable not just for being a strong addition to the niche subgenre of submarine movies, but as the first collaboration with Washington and the last with Simpson and Bruckheimer, as the former died in 1996. His partnership with Bruckheimer would last 2 more films. That year also saw Scott expanding his contributions to the cinema world and being acknowledged for them. The Scott brothers led a group in purchasing England's famed Shepperton Studios, where Ridley shot much of Alien, ensuring its prosperity and continued mark on the film industry. 1996's The Fan is, on the surface, an awful psychological thriller. But De Niro gives one of his silliest bad guy turns as a baseball fan obsessed with Wesley Snipes' superstar San Francisco Giant. Somehow, that makes it worth a look. 1998's Enemy of the State reunited Scott with Hackman and added a fresh-off double-smash, double-header, Independence Day and Men in Black Will Smith to the mix. Still, it was only a minor success, and story-wise is fairly basic for what could have been a complex conspiracy movie. The early 2000s offered a mix of successes and failures. 2001's Spy Game, with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt, is a strong enough thriller, and 2004's Man on Fire, his second pairing with Washington, based on an idea he started developing in the mid-80s before he got Top Gun, was blasted by critics but better received by viewers. Its most notable asset might be Dakota Fanning, which is interesting since Scott had a reputation as being more of a man's director. 2005's Domino would be the first time he put a female as the lead, and certainly title, character, with Keira Knightley starring as the infamous bounty hunter Domino Harvey. It would be the worst reviewed movie of his career. Scott even admitted going overboard on style, calling it a product of my research, having met with methed out bounty hunters. Tony Scott's frenetic, chaotic camera work was a hallmark of his filmography. It, in retrospect, set a bar for a certain kind of visual style seen in so many action and franchise movies since. What stands as impressive is that it feels as if it has no restraint, yet is so calculated so as not to interfere with the story or performances, although it sometimes did, as he admitted with Domino. As he put it, he was constantly criticized about style over content. I was consistently being criticized, and my press was horrible. One critic wrote he was always shooting the hell out of nearly every sequence to achieve maximum sensation. As if that's a bad thing? Around the mid-2000s, Scott expressed interest in remaking cult classic The Warriors, shifting the story to Los Angeles, but that never got off the ground. The same went for his remake of Sam Peckinpah's seminal western, The Wild Bunch. Also during this time, Scott's contributions to television would emerge, with his co-funded Scott-free productions producing hit TV series like The Good Wife and Numbers, with Scott frequently getting credit for the goofy spelling. Scott's final 3 films would all see him pairing again with Denzel Washington for a total of 5 collaborations. Deja Vu in 2006, The Taking of Pelham 123 in 2009, a remake of one of the best action movies of the 70s, and Unstoppable in 2010, which would be one of his best received, summed up on Rotten Tomatoes as fast, loud, and relentless, which could really sum up most of Tony Scott's career. As Scott once put it, quote, "The biggest edge I live on is directing. That's the most scary, dangerous thing you can do in your life."
Tragic story right now that's coming from Los Angeles. Tony Scott, the British-born director of Top Gun and other Hollywood blockbusters, has jumped to his death from a bridge. Now, Scott,
the scary, dangerous career of Tony Scott ended on August 19th, 2012, when he jumped from the Vincent Thomas Bridge in Los Angeles, committing suicide at the age of 68. One witness reported Scott looked nervous, while many reports suggest there was no hesitation to the act. Tony Scott left 2 suicide notes, one in his car with important contacts, and one at his office, specifically for his family and friends. The autopsy revealed an antidepressant and a sleep aid in his system, but no underlying medical conditions, including cancer, as was reported by the media. But according to his brother Ridley, Tony did in fact have cancer, something their eldest brother had died from. Quote, Tony had been very unwell, actually, and that's the moment I realized I had to get very close to him again, though we were always close. I'd go to him even when he was doing his recovery.